really encompasses the idea of the other than us, other than those individuals who are Persian, who are practicing Zoroastrianism, other than those individuals who are Greek, other than those individuals who are Roman or Christian or Muslims. So when did the Hindus decide that they're Hindus? That doesn't come about until the 14 and 1500s. And of course, Bengal and a few other places, they said, you know, okay, I guess we're Hindus. You know, so, but it took a little time for them to even to adjust to that name. So, and the idea of an ism, well, that's a modern concept too. So when I talk about Hinduism, I just want you to realize ahead of time, Hindus didn't think of themselves as Hindus until recently, until within the last 1,500 years. But still, for convenience sake, I still want to go into the origins of Hinduism after going through that speech. But how in the world am I going to do this? A lot of scholars, they just kind of laugh at this topic, and at the university, sometimes they skip this topic altogether. In fact, it's not considered historical or even important to investigate. So, what's nice about this group is you get the privilege of getting the secret information. You know, you have something to lord it off on other people. You know, I know something that you don't, man, yeah. Now, so what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of review. Actually, I'm going to do this first. India. We're all familiar with it. The first people in India, they're known as the Mundas. Now, where did they come from, the Mundas? They came from the area of southeast China. Whoa. Where are they? And they're an Astro-Asiatic people. Now, when I say Astro-Asiatic, don't think of like astrology. They're not from outer space or anything like that. Astro as in Australia. That concept, even though they're not typically from Australia. They're from that region, and they migrated in, and they were here in India during the Paleolithic and the Neolithic period. The next group to arrive are known as the Dravidians. Now, this is a fun one. Does anybody know where the Dravidians are from? And you're allowed to say it if you know. Huh? They're from Dravidia. The land of Dravidia. Anybody else? Where are the Dravidians? Where do you think they're from? You'll never guess. And the interesting thing about this is that it is Indian archaeologists that discovered where this is.
Central Asia?
No. It's amazing. You'll freak out when you hear it. An archaeologist by the name of Lal, L-A-L. He's from India, and with other Indian archaeologists, what they did is they kind of worked backwards of the Dravidian migrations, and they worked backwards, going further and further back, going toward the west, and they found a corner of Dravidians, still people of Dravidian stock, that were of all places in Iran. And it's like, oh, wow. And they kept tracing them, and they realized that in the what's called the Elamite people, that they practiced some of the same kinds of serpent customs. They have actually a serpent cult. They planned their temples the same way. They were matrilinear, you know, the same way. But guess what? And those Dravidians, by the way, are still there today. They're still the pocket of Dravidians. It's like, hey, look, see? So this is the way we have to go. So they kept going backwards across the Mesopotamia, and Lal discovered archaeological sites with Dravidian artifacts in the area of Upper Egypt and Sidon. Upper Egypt and Sidon. Is that amazing or what? You would never expect the Dravidians to come from there. They did DNA tests. They went through the mitochondria, they went through the genetics, and they realized that they are or were a Mediterranean stock people. And They realized that they're from this region, and they just slowly migrated across. And they arrived in India around 3,500 to 3,000 BCE. That's when they arrived, the Dravidians. Okay. So what do they believe? I mean, this is why we're here, right? Let's talk about India before the arrival of the Indo-Europeans. What do they believe? Well, they believe very much in the importance of the fertility of the fields. They were an agricultural people, the Dravidians. They believed in the spirits of nature. In fact, for instance, they believe in what are called yakshis and yakshas. And what are these? Well, the idea is, in general, is these are images of nature spirits that are discovered in archaeological sets. The males are called yakshas and are sometimes handsome and strong warrior types, or great monsters with gappy mouths, or dwarves with protruding bellies. These are yakshas. The yakshis are sometimes very seductive and beautiful women with saucer-shaped eyes, long black hair, very wide articulated hips, but extremely narrow around the waist. Or sometimes they're vile Medusa-like creatures. These yakshis and yakshas were oftentimes placed in front of villages to protect them. They were the spirit that protected these villages. In some cases, they were put into the center of the village near trees, and they were associated with nature. They were like dyads and so forth. They're situated with trees, sorry. And I'm spilling all over the place. Connected with tree spirits. They're kind of like sprites in some sense. And other types, they're kind of like nymphs and so forth. So these are the beliefs of these indigenous people. But the best place for evidence of the Dravidians is a civilization called the Mohenjo-Daro Harappan civilization. Now, I'll say this. Nobody can agree what to call it. Some people call it the Indus Valley civilization. Some other people call it the Mohenjo-Daro civilization. Some people just call it the Harappan civilization. And if you get really complicated, sometimes it's the Mohenjo-Daro-Harappan civilization. Because, scholars love to do this. So what is this? I mean, why would they call themselves Mohenjo-Daro? And the answer to that question is they didn't. You see, what happened was, in Pakistan, near the Indus River, there's this like little dump of a town, dumpy little village. And nearby this dumpy little village, they discovered this amazing civilization, huge metropolis. It had a population of 35,000 people. And when they discovered this in 1921, they said, well, we'll just call it Mohenjo-Daro, after the little, pitiful little town nearby. So that was the idea. Then, of course, they found another great, gigantic city, once again with a population the same size, that thrived around 2,500 BCE. And at the same time, they discovered it next to another pitiful little town called Harappa, and hence they gave the name Harappa. So there's kind of a rivalry. It's like, we'll call it the Mohenjo-Daro civilization because we discovered it here at Mohenjo-Daro. No, we'll call it the Harappan civilization because we discovered it at Harappan. So hence just call it the Indus Valley civilization. Okay. So what about this civilization? Well, I find it fascinating. Now, I say that it dates from 2,500 to 2000 BCE, and I just say 2,500. And I don't say earlier. The reason why is we don't know how much earlier. And you think that of all people I should know. It's like, Dr. Rietveld, please, can you, 2,500 BC, that's great, but doesn't it go a little earlier? We don't know because of something that's happened. And that is, the soil, the groundwater, has risen. And so when archaeologists attempt to dig further down, all of a sudden the groundwater comes and it starts flowing over the site. And it covers it up. And the groundwater has also destroyed much of the material culture at a certain layer. So we don't know before 2500 BCE. We really don't know. So it's hard for us to estimate that. But we do know that, that after that point, it was a very, very well-planned cities, for example. By the way, more than just 2. Archaeologists have discovered 15 of these cities, but we think that there was at least 5 more. And these are not small cities. 35,000 people. That's a lot of people in the ancient world. The streets were very wide and very straight. They had apartment buildings. In fact, you had apartment living in 2500 BCE. Isn't that great? You could live in an apartment. They had 2-story apartments. They had 3-story apartments. If you're doing a little bit better in life, you had housing. You had basically, it's the old Mediterranean style as well, where you have the opening in the middle and the houses surround the outside. So you have the courtyard in the middle. But what I find is really interesting is that these houses were supplied with wells. And what they would do is they take the water, and the water was stored, and then it was used for running water, for flushable toilets, and for showers. So if you're living in the Indus Valley civilization, you're going to wake up in the morning and you can have that shower. Now, whether it's a cold shower or hot shower is a contention among scholars. Some people say, well, they heated the water, and others say no. So it kind of goes back and forth. But you did have, in a sense, running water. You did have flushable toilets. So what do you do with the refuse? This is the problem. What happened was the water went through a very elaborate sewer system that went under the streets, very well organized, but then the water went out into the fields, and it was used to fertilize the fields. Now, I don't know about you, but the idea of fertilizing the fields with human fecal matter just kind of bothers me. Can you imagine?
The Koreans do it.
Huh?
The Koreans still do it.
Yeah, so, but,
There's a way nowadays to sanitize it.
yeah, that's what happened. So that's how they did it. They're a very unified society. What do you mean by unified? The bricks were all exactly the same size in every single city. Every single, I think it's like 1 by 4 by 20 or something inches. Every one. Which is strange. The cities are all perfectly arranged with straight streets. It's almost like somebody took a stamp and here's that city, here's another city, so uniform because they had somehow town planning. It was designed. Now, we don't know the earlier layers. It could have been a real disorganized city with, switchbacks and alleyways. But the problem is, before 2500 BCE, we don't know what's down there. All we know is that when we get these cities, they're all really well planned out. Right? Of course, they wore cotton clothes. They had citadels. They had palaces. They had bathing facilities with changing rooms. So you change beforehand, and then you went to these bathing facilities. But what about what do they believe in? All right. Well, wait, before I go there, they also had writing. They had a writing system, and actually a very elaborate writing system with all these wonderful symbols, and we can't read any of it. Yes?
What is the topography of this area?
It's flat. It's very flat. Especially, it's the Indus Valley.
So you could do a stamp.
So you could stamp. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
How come, maybe I'm just not reading it enough, it's quite possible, but all I've ever seen of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa is a bunch of just brick, falling down brick walls. So they have all this other material, and it doesn't seem to get into any books I've ever seen.
I know.
I'm not gainsaying it, I'm just saying.
No.
It just kind of amazes me.
No, in fact, many times, this is being recorded, but who cares? I had one colleague where I substituted for him. And I was supposed to get to a certain point because he was gone on leave. And I didn't quite get to India, and especially this topic. And he looked at me and says, well, it's not worth teaching anyway. We're going to skip on to China. So there's that feeling in academia that this topic is not worthy of investigation. The fact that you guys are here tells me it is, right? Beliefs. Now, they believed very much in fertility goddesses. We find a whole bunch of them. We find with very elongated hips, in many cases, the bellies larger and the breasts swollen to represent fertility. We find other female figurines that are the dancer quality. One that even has a bikini, which is really interesting. It's called the dancer. You have so many female figurines already. You're kind of making the deduction that it's very open towards women. In fact, you have images of women and men facing each other looking as equals. Okay, that tells you a lot. But there is one interesting, enigmatic male figure. And what he looks like, I guess I should actually look at my notes. I don't know why. I haven't done this yet. What he looks like, if I can even, actually, it doesn't even have the right page. Oh, it's even the wrong place altogether. Okay. Boy. I guess we'll do without the notes. What happens is that he has 3 heads or 3 faces, and he has horns, and he has animals all around him. And he's in a meditative, cross-legged position. Many people believe that he is an early version of Shiva, who was at that time a fertility god. So there's evidence that some of the gods that are worshipped today in India come from this lower stratum, so to speak. Okay. So what's going to happen next? Since I lost the one part, let's talk about the Indo-Europeans. Yes?
Pachupati, Lord of the Animals.
Pachupati, that's right.
Pachupati, that's who he is.
Yes.
What they say.
Yes, well, and he is the Lord of the animals, and he's the horn god.
That's right, which is always fun to me, looking at that, when you look at Cernunnos later on.
Well, yeah, because you had ideas of horn gods throughout Indo-European, well, of course that's going to spread across it.
Yeah.
Let's go there. Now, how many people were here last week? Oh, okay. Well, this will be fun. We're going to do a little review on the Indo-Europeans, ready? And I'm going to get down here because I feel like I'm... Yes.
Before we dive into the Indo-Europeans, you were just describing the animal master from Harappa or Mohenjo-daro, I assume?
Yes.
Have you seen the similar figuration in the Gudistral cauldron, pre-Christian Celtic, a figure identified with Cernunnos with horns?
That has similarities to it.
Sitting in a lotus posture with animals bowing down.
Yes, I have,
And
actually.
they're not identical, but they're very similar.
Yes, I have.
Would you care to comment on that similarity?
At this point, no, but yeah, there's similarities in imagery all over the place when it comes to a horned figure that's connected to animals and animal vitality in life. So, but yes. Well, I do want to make one little aside. And once again, I'll say this. I have a friend who collects antiquities, and he has a figure that's from Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and it's a beautiful piece. It's an absolutely beautiful piece. But what I want to say is it's Inanna. And Inanna, of course, you already know, this is a Semitic, it's actually a Sumerian and Semitic goddess, Inanna or Ishtar, right? And it is Inanna, and it was discovered at Mohenjo-daro Harappan from that period of time, which shows you there's influence coming from also Samaria when it comes to worship. Unfortunately, we're not able to figure out what they actually believed in because, well, we can't read their writing. Now, also, what happened to them? I know the old story is this. This is the old-fashioned story. The old-fashioned story is that you have this great advanced civilization. They're doing really well. And here comes the Indo-Europeans. Here comes the Aryans. Here comes the bad guys. And they come and they destroy this advanced civilization. They burn, loot. Well, guess what? That didn't happen. It's a great dramatic story, and I like it a lot, but that's not what happened. Okay.
It makes a flash of the Titan.
Yes, I know, exactly, right. So what's going to happen instead is that the Mohenjo-Daro civilization starts to shrink and becomes smaller and smaller. And so by the time the Indo-Europeans arrive, the cities are already really small, and then there's a small burnt layer. But they're already shrunk at the time of the destruction. Now, some people say that they disappeared because the river shifted. Some people say that there was actually a flood that ruined everything.
Yeah.
So you have the people who say it's a drought. You have some people who say it's a flood that helped destroy it. You have some people who say that, no, it's because, remember that sewage system that slowly with alkalite and other kinds of toxic levels into the soil constantly going in there, that it made it useless. So there's a lot of controversy. All we know, it's reduced to nothing. So let's move on now to the Indo-Europeans. Here they come. And they do come. Now, before we go here, I have to address the controversy of the Indo-Europeans. Did they enter into India? Well, before 2009, it was a contest. Some people said that no, the culture of India, the Aryans were indigenous to that place, some people said, were indigenous to India. They, they learned through various ways of an Indo-European tongue, but it's very much an indigenous culture. It's very self-contained. And so the innovations of Hinduism is truly Indian, without any Western or other kinds of forces involved. That is until 2009, when those who work with genetics got involved and isolated the mitochondria and took a look at the X chromosomes and examined these people. In 2009, it was determined by not historians, not archaeologists,
Not linguists.
not linguists, but genetic scholars, that they are indeed Indo-European in the northern section, mixed with Dravidian groups. And as of 2011, it was established that they mixed sometime around 3,500 years ago, using the same tests. Once again, these are scientists, not... So now what's happened is there's been a gigantic reversal. It's taken some time, but now it's kind of, what do you do with this empirical evidence? Some people said, well, yeah, but there's not an archaeological trail that leads them in to India, these invaders, these Aryans. But there really is. There is a pottery ware that appears at this time. Oh, yes, there is. And there are some other subtle changes when it comes to cremation and burial and the flex burial. And there's changes when it comes to the structure of the huts, of the villages. So there are actual changes. But some people say, yeah, but we need a strong archaeological evidence that really move it over. I said, you know what? There is as much archaeological evidence for the Indo-Europeans coming in as there are with the Gaelic groups going into Scotland. As much archaeological evidence as the Huns coming into Europe. So this is called people who are being very biased, who are just trying to have India first as a concept, but now it's going flat in the face of science. Are we okay? Is that making sense? Now let's get fun, all right? Okay. Well, I just had to address that issue because this is a big fight,
Yeah.
but it's laid to rest in 2009 and 2011. If you're interested, I have the studies.
Oh, good, thank you.
So I could point out where to find it and go through the breakdown and everything else.
Yeah,
It's pretty fun. In fact, part of the breakdown, they realize that those people who have more Indo-European in them are from the upper castes, which is really interesting, yes.
And Marcia and I used to we were privileged to go to the VESCO conference every year. It was held over in Glendale. A lot of Indian scholars, physicians, and a wonderful Vedic scholar who, after 30 years, unfortunately went back to Andhra Pradesh. And he's about 90, so he's probably going to stay there. But it was the Vedic Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization.
Okay.
And so they talked about Veda, and in one of these wonderful conferences, right in the middle of it, they started talking about just this subject.
Mm-hmm.
It was well before 2009. And the non-Indians felt like getting under the tables. And also some of the Indians who were not participating in the altercation, the men in suits got up and almost came to blows.
Yeah, no, what I'm talking about is actually a big deal.
We know
I
what
know.
we're talking about.
Can you believe people are actually fighting over what I just talked
Yeah.
about?
It was,
Swing,
It was-
we just get emotional about these
we
things.
were scared, really.
Yeah, yeah. So I get to go in public about this. I can hide at my home now.
Take your helmet.
Okay. Now let's go into, now that we've established that, can we have fun talking about the Indo-Europeans now? Okay, let's have fun. Now this is the part where I do the review. All right, so, here we go. A long time ago, right, you remember all this, you had the Paleolithic era. And during the Paleolithic era, in Southern Europe, and of course all the way across the central areas, latitude sets, you had a culture where you had nice, big, heavy game. Remember this? Remember you had the mammoth, and you had the reindeer, and living was easy, right? Sort of. And remember we talked about the fact that you had naturally a division between women and men when it came to food collection, right? When it came to food collection, you had the women did the gathering, the men did the hunting. Can anybody tell me why the women got stuck with the gathering? You want to tell me? Yes.
Because of their
Periods.
their menstrual cycles.
Menstrual cycles did kind of
And pregnancy.
throw off the game. That's true. Childbirth, right? Childbirth. You give birth to a kid, you're not going to leave that kid in the cave or the dwelling place and just go, I'm going hunting.
Yeah.
Especially since you're going to be breastfeeding for the first 5 years. 5 years. Can you imagine? What a pain that would be. 5 years. Breastfeeding. I mean, seriously, literally, you know? So what's going to happen is that, well, if you leave but remember, it's free food. It's free, easy gain food, you know, and people then and today are cheap, you know, and free milk. That sounds like anyway. Free milk, free supply, and then of course you're going to have more than one kid. So they're going to stay close, and because they stayed close, they did the gathering. And we do have other evidence to demonstrate that they were, you know, connected to this job, namely grave, the way they're buried, the burial sites. The men were the hunters, but it was still an egalitarian society, right? You go, well, we talked about this already. No, this has everything to do with the Indo-Europeans. Then what happens around 13,000 BCE, we talked about this, what happens? What starts to go away? The ice. The ice age. See, this is good. You guys learn. And the climate's going to change. And the climate, as it changes, those big, easy-to-catch animals are going to go north. And they're going to be replaced by gazelle, deer, rabbit, which of course is a little harder to catch, right? So as a result of that, more and more the people who stay are going to depend upon not just animal protein, but more vegetative protein. They're going to focus in on plants to survive, right? We talked about this. Focus about plants to survive, and then what's going to happen? Well, they're going to eat less and less meat because it's harder to find. They're going to eat more and more vegetative matter, and women are going to be focusing more and more upon upon the plant life to the point where agriculture is born, right? Of course, it's going to take how long?
Oh gosh, you said.
4,000 years for them.
Because you said it was not 10,000 years ago.
Yeah. So it's going to take a while. Then I talked about the group that goes north. This is the Indo-European story. The group that decides that I don't want to adjust to the new environment. I want to have life as it always has been in the past. I'm a traditionalist. I like what's customary. I like what's comfortable. I don't like new things. I'm going to follow that game and go north. I want to feed on mammoth and feed on reindeer. And so they follow going north. But as they go north, there's less plant life. Less for the women to gather. Less for them to do. And more they're going to focus their culture upon men and hunting. And patriarchy starts to be created. See how this works? Patriarchy starts to become part of life. And then, of course, as they travel around, they eat mammoth. I talked about all different kinds of mammoth they had, right? And they're up, and the beauty of this, I love this, is that they were the mammoth hunters of central Russia. And I was very excited to find that the 2009 mitochondria evidence shows that actually the Indo-Europeans did not originate from the Caucasus Mountains. They originated from central Russia and then moved down to the Caucasus Mountains. And ta-da! I'm going, yes, I knew it. You know, it worked. So they had mammoth all the time, and then they ran out of mammoth and other kinds of things. And then life gets tough again, right? So when life gets tough, you're fighting over scarce food, and the men are in charge. What are they going to do? They're going to create a what kind of caste or class? A warrior caste. They're going to fight each other. They're going to focus on fighting over these limited resources. And so you have a hierarchy that's in place. That's going to be created. But it's the warriors who are at the top at first. They're at the top. And then you have the priests and religious leaders next. And you have the peasants next. That was the first, in a sense, caste system that's being created. The caste system was created before they ever arrived in India, according to scholars today. There's already a caste system before they even got there. But it's a simplified one. It's only a three-tiered. So what do they believe in? This is where it gets fun. They believed that there was an ultimate sacrifice. Now later on, Hindus will interpret this as Purusha. There's this ultimate sacrifice. And the pieces of this sacrifice were cut apart and made into parts of the universe. From the eyes of the primordial man comes the sun. From the ears of the primordial man comes the four corners, according to the Rietveld. And so the universe is created out of this sacrifice. See how that works? The splitting apart of the primordial man. That's how the world was created. Well, what's the belief system? Well, they observe something that I think most of you haven't thought about. Lauren, what did you have for dinner?
Haven't had dinner yet.
What did you have for lunch?
Yes.
What'd you have for lunch?
Bowl of soup.
You had soup. What's in that soup?
I'm sorry?
What's in that soup?
Lentils.
Lentils. Were lentils ever alive?
Sure.
They're alive. So you're feeding upon life
Mm-hmm.
to live.
Yep.
What'd you have? What'd you have for dinner or lunch?
Chinese.
Chinese.
Yes.
What's in the Chinese food?
I had noodles and rice and chicken.
Noodles is made out of what?
Noodles made out of wheat and,
Wheat. Was wheat ever alive?
yeah.
You fed on life. So life feeds upon life, does it not? Did anybody here eat a stone?
No.
Did anybody here eat a rock?
Sometimes it gets ground up in the wheat.
Oh, yeah. It'd be between a rock and a hard place. Sorry. So, are you following how this? So life feeds upon life, right? This is what they observed. They thought life feeds upon life. So how do you keep the universe alive? You've got to feed it. You've got to feed the universe to keep it strong. See how that works? It gets hungry, just like you, just like me. This is what they believe. So now you've got to feed the universe. Now what happens if you decide that you're not going to feed the universe? What do you think they think would happen? What do you think? The universe,
Everything stops.
everything stops. You're going to starve. You're going to be hungry. And so the universe will start to do what? It will start to fall apart. So you've got to continually sacrifice in order to feed the universe life, in order for life to come back to you in the cycle. So in a sense, blood is rainwater. See? Flesh is wheat. Yeah? Which I think is interesting, right?
Yeah.
Also, a little aside, sometimes blood is also wine, the fruit of the vine. So hence you have this, yes, Eucharistic idea there. So this is the point. You see, life feeds upon life. It keeps living. But this becomes a problem when it comes to these Indo-European beliefs. Now, where's the evidence for this? Is it just in India? No. This is where I was doing research on this, and it was pretty fun. We have stories about life feeding upon life, of the idea of having the ultimate sacrifice that creates the world, and that you in turn sacrifice yourself or an animal to return the energy back in old Russian folk tales, because they are Indo-Europeans.
And the Jews.
Yeah, you have that too with the Jews.
And also the Zoroastrians.
Zoroastrians, in fact, Herodotus talks about the fact that those who were Zoroastrianists, they had a certain hymn that they performed as they cut the animal apart in order to feed the universe back. And of course the Persians are Indo-European. But also the Frisians, old Frisian tales, and various other Germanic tales. And sometimes they're Christianized. And sometimes they say, well, as opposed to having Purusha, they replace it with the body of Christ, right? Creating all these different things. See how that works?
And Tiamat.
Yeah, right, yes.
Was the Aztec practice,
And the Mayan practice too.
was that in any way connected with the same?
Well, you have there will be commonalities all the way throughout, because people make this observation that life feeds upon life. But what's unique about the Indo-European idea is that they have Agni, who is the god of fire, and what he does is he's the intercessor between the realm above and the realm below. You see, you can't go up to the god and say, here's a hamburger. You hungry? Hey, go ahead, have a hamburger. It's not going to work, is it? You got to turn that hamburger. No, not really. Let's use some better food, okay? Squash, there. You guys are wrinkling your nose on squash, okay? But, okay, you're not going to feed them squash. What you're going to do is try to, in this case, you turn the food into their kind of food by burning it. See? And then it transforms it into God food stuff. Right? So this is common throughout antiquity too. You have stories of the Sumerian and the Babylonian gods feeding upon the sacrifices like flies, remember that, so, yum. I love that analogy. But this is the idea, you feed the gods to keep them alive. Okay, now, let's move along. Now, I told you that you had a warrior caste, and you had a priestly caste, and then everybody else. Well, these priests are pretty smart. These priests are known as Brahmin. Okay. Later on, they call Brahmin, but they're still the priests. And they figure out, before they even enter into India, they figure out how to do this. They figure, you know what we're going to do? We're going to do our rites to feed the gods so complicated that they're going to have to use us. It's going to be so esoteric, so out there. I have to hold my heel, spin around the circle, and say certain words, and then I perform the sacrifice. So that means that nobody else can do it except for who? The priests. They have a monopoly on the power. With a monopoly on the power, they get to be moved from second caste to first caste.
And I always liked how they still fought over that all the time.
Huh?
They still fought, the Kshatriyas and the Brahmins
Yes.
were always fighting, because even in their religion too, you had, what was it, Rama with an axe, one of the avatars of Lord Vishnu, was where he was writing the fact that they had killed Brahmins.
Right. Right.
And,
The struggle still goes on.
oh, I know, and it's hysterical.
And even there's...
It was never really set, they would fight all the time between each other.
Yeah, there's even differences in the Bhagavad Gita too.
Yeah.
Same kind of, the Kshatriya caste was just going, well, hey, kind of, aren't we the kings? And the idea is, no, you're the muscle. We're the ones who do the thinking. That's the idea. So this is what's going on. So now there's a monopoly. Sounds like a game. And it was a game. Now.
Didn't they invent chess? That is a game.
It is. Yeah. That's true. So now they enter into India. See? This is the society that invades. And when they arrive, what they do is they bring their ideas, and this belief system, it becomes known as Brahmanism. Brahmanism, not Hinduism yet. It's called Brahmanism. This is the religion of the Brahmins, because they're the ones in charge. The moment they're no longer completely 100% in charge, that's when you move from Brahmanism to Hinduism. But remember, that's only in hindsight 2020, because nobody knew themselves as Hindus in the first place. So you have it, it's an academic term. See how that works? So you have to be careful. But this is how scholars identify the change, the switchover. But we're going to go into detail on this. Don't worry. So what happens? They arrive. And do I have any notes on this whatsoever? It's funny. What's going to happen? Oh, good, I have notes. That's good. This is your notes, though. Okay, so, we covered all this. Okay, so Brahmanism. Okay, let's talk about the Vedas. And I would like to talk about them a little bit more, but you have the collection, the Vedas. The idea is they're Shruti. They are that which is spoken and that which is heard. And the reason why they're that which is spoken, that which is heard, is because they weren't originally written down. They were transmitted through oral tradition. So the words of the Vedas themselves were considered sacred. And for a little while there, they didn't have writing, but when they did finally have writing, there was a problem with that too. Right? Now, the language of the Indo-Europeans, who were called Aryans, that language is called Sanskrit. But something happens with Sanskrit. What happens is that they lose that language, except for it becomes a sacred language. And they adopt something called Prakrit instead, which is an indigenous language, which is the roots for Hindi and Bengali, and other kinds of Urdu and those other kinds of languages. But can you believe that? They have a sacred written language, and they spoke another language. This is just unheard of, right? What? Wait, another religion had that? Right, Hebrew, right? amongst the Jews, right? You had Hebrew was the sacred language, but what was the one that was used was Aramaic and Greek. And of course, later on with Catholicism, right? Latin, right? And people, and of course the indigenous languages. So this is kind of what happens. Okay, so you have that which is here. Okay, we have the Rig Veda. I really do need to, as I'm looking for my notes frantically, any questions at this point? Any questions? Yes.
Marcia and I attempted to take an oral Sanskrit class, and also some written ones, but don't ask us to recite anything. Well, ask her, but not me. But the lovely young instructor from India in the oral class, he put up on the board between the North Indian languages and the Dravidian languages of the South. They're generally assumed to be not really related. And he put sentences up in Malayalam, Telugu, and I know Telugu has a lot of Sanskrit influence, but in Malayalam and Telugu and Tamil, I think.
Oh, Tamil. Okay, yeah.
And he put the
Tamil Dravidian.
right, and he put the same sentences in Sanskrit and Hindi and something else. And he said, you will notice that grammatically they all have the same word order.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Which shows you the influence.
Yeah.
And what's also funny too is because when you talk about the Shruti, of that which is heard, and the Sanskrit is supposed to be the sacred language, Tamil also is considered to be a sacred language too. And it has its own, the Alvar, which were the, the Bhakti, the devotional Vaishnavites.
Right.
Of there, where all of their hymns and everything are considered just to be as sacred and to be Shruti as opposed to Smriti.
Just what is heard, the sounds themselves.
Yeah, but because like when you were talking about the whole thing with the Dravidians and then the whole fusion there, they both did get their sacred. What we have is our sacred thing too. Just on par with the whole thing,
Yes.
Also, one thing, I studied Russian 40 years ago, so I can't really remember it, but when I was studying Sanskrit, I kept getting these funny echoes in my head with some of the vocabulary. Because I thought, that sounds like Russian, that sounds like Russian.
Oh, yeah.
And it turns out that somebody came to class with a list of 300 Ukrainian words lifted out of something, didn't even change. And the same in Russian, even Lithuanian.
Lithuanian, yes.
The same geography, so actually linguistics does bear it out.
It does. In fact, we're going to go into that in a few moments.
Sorry, we jumped on you.
Oh, no, it's fine. No. Real quick, you have the Rig Veda. And the Rig Veda basically tells, a lot of it, you learn about the Aryans through the Rig Veda. We learn that the Aryans like to hunt, dance, drink. They like their chariots a lot. They like their horses and bronze swords. They live only for battle and glory, whether it be against the Dravidians and the Bundas or, of course, against themselves. Happen a lot. The Rig Veda seems to be interpreted by those at that time, not later on, as that you're able to bribe the gods, in certain ways. Now, I'm going to say there's going to be a reinterpretation through the Upanishads, but we're not there yet. So the idea is,
Greeks too. I always love that. That was always the parallel with the Greeks. You do this, you do that, and you're going to naturally get it. Even the demons. If they did the certain things that they were supposed to do, all the observances, Ravana, he gets his boon.
Yep.
And he's a demon.
Yeah, so you can bribe the gods. Now that means, now this is what's interesting. What happens is, remember I told you about the feed the gods, right? Yeah. You can feed the gods and they will seem to obey you. Well, this goes a little bit too far. And so the thought comes, it's kind of like this. Some of you have cats, right?
Yeah.
And your cat may not like you that well, except around feeding time. Around feeding time, that cat just becomes a ball of love, right? Right? Or demanding. But the idea is this: is that there are stories about where a god does not even like you. They hate you, in fact. But if you offer to the Brahmin priest the proper sacrifice done the proper way, you are taken care of in Brahmanism, not Hinduism. In Brahmanism, you're scot-free. If you kill somebody, if you are from an upper caste, you can get away with murder if you do the proper sacrifice in the proper way. It kind of forces the god because it goes to whoever feeds it. Once again, Brahmanism, not Hinduism. This is one of the problems that Hinduism was going to address. Well, there's got to be some kind of moral consequence. But we're not there yet. See, it'll develop soon. We're almost there, but we're not quite yet. So now you also have the Samaveda, the Book of Chants, the Yajurveda. But the Atharva Veda, I want to tell you a story. It's the book of magic. Of course, they believe that diseases are caused by demons, different kinds of entities, different kinds of monsters, and I list the names of those demons, monsters, on the handout, which you didn't get, I don't think.
Yeah.
So, but I want to tell you a fun story. And whenever I tell you this story, nobody ever believes it, so I'm going to give you the exact reference. It's from the Atharva Veda. It's hymn 10.7. And it's about the beginning of the universe. Now, I love this part of the story. According to this work, in the beginning, primary existence, there was what's called the Hiranyarabha. And I wrote it down there so you can see it. That means the golden womb from which the universe was formed. In the beginning, it was this very small place. What's going to happen is the energy, according to this, starts to build up, called tapa. It builds up, and suddenly, skamba! Boom! It explodes. And the explosion is like the branches of a tree that go out. And the gods are created. And they, in turn, start to create the universe. Now, there are these little fragments, these little, like atoms called pamsu, that start to build and become rocks and stones and the earth, and they become more and more complex. So that's what they said in 1000 BCE. What do you think? What does this sound like to you?
Big Bang.
Do you see some kind of connection there? Now, what happens when it comes to the idea of later on that the universe keeps on going? Well, you know how this works. That which went out like this, according to Hindu belief, then goes like this again. Back to the golden egg, they say. And then it goes, boom, again. And then this goes, retracts. Does anybody know what ride we're on right now? We're on the fourth ride, the Kali,
Tell you.
right? We're the fourth time around. So when people say Hinduism is always constantly forever in the universe, well, I don't know. It was just -4. Maybe it goes -1, -2, -3. I don't know. But they're listing 4. This is the fourth age. And it keeps going like this. This is amazing, I think, for 1000 BCE, this concept. There's another story that I have to tell. I don't have to tell you this story. But there's another work called the Brahmanas. And there's a he's kind of a human but divine kind of character. His name is Manu. And the story goes like this. I love the story. One day, Manu, he's a king, he's washing his hands, and he looks down, and he sees a fish there. And the fish looks up to him and says, "If you save me, I will save you." It's the original fish tale, anyway. So what happens is that he takes that fish and he puts it into a bowl. And the fish grows, and so he puts it into a bigger bowl. The fish grows, he puts it into a bigger bowl, a bigger bowl, a bigger bowl, a bigger bowl. Pretty soon it's like a tank. Then he releases the fish into the ocean. But the fish remembered, his promise. He came up to him and says, "Okay, I'm going to save you." For the Brahmanas, he says, "I want you to build a big boat because there's going to be a flood. And put 2 of every animal, same thing. 2 of every animal in there. And so the flood comes about. and it rains, and it covers the earth. But this fish, what happens is that the boat is connected directly to the fish, and the fish navigates the boat to safety. Isn't that a great fish? Then, of course, it leads Manu to the top of the Himalayas, and the boat is set down, the waters subside, and there's a great sacrifice. Does this sound familiar?
Oh, yeah.
So these stories are everywhere to be found. Everywhere to be found. The funny thing is that they have the exact date of when this flood occurred. And by our calculations connected to the Indian dating system, they said that the Great Flood happened in the year 3102 BCE. 3102. Not that it did actually happen at all, but I'm just saying that was their reckoning. All right. Now, let's see. Where are we now?
Oh, one thing, James?
Yes.
That was interesting is our teacher also said, he says, if you listen to the static noise, the noise that was left, if you in space, if you can think of that anyway, he said it's ohm.
Oh,
He said that ohm is like the residual noise of the leftover from the Big Bang.
that's interesting.
And that's what, you know,
Yeah.
when you talk about the whole Big Bang thing, I'm
Yeah.
going, well, they talk about that, it's just fascinating to me. I mean, whether it is or not, I don't know, but
No, absolutely.
yeah, it's fascinating.
Well, let's talk about the caste system. I don't want to be typecasted, but I have to do something here. The caste system, the top caste, you have the Brahmin, all right. And those are the priests. Next, you have the Kshatriya, right? Those are the warriors. Those are the political leaders. Next level down, you have the Vaishya, or Vaishya. And those are the merchants, the artisans. And then you have the Shudras. Those are the peasants, the laborers. And then you have those who are not anything at all. They're called outcasts. Outcasts. That's where you get the idea from. Before 500 BCE, the Indo-European population was about 30%, and they occupied all the top three castes. They were the Brahmin, they were the Kshatriya, they were the Vaishya, which means the Dravidians, the Mundas, they were kind of stuck in the bottom. They were the Shudras, they were the untouchables. Do you think they were happy about this? No. So access to belief, access to the Brahmin priest was kind of hard. Because the Brahmin priests are going to favor those who are fellow Indo-Europeans. See how that works? And those who have more material wealth to give for offerings. And it disenfranchised the Shudras and those other people who were indigenous. They still continue to worship the same gods and goddesses that they did during the time of the Mohenjo-Daro-Harappan civilization in the lower castes. They didn't fully incorporate the beliefs of the Indo-Europeans. In fact, that's complained about in the Vedas. The fact that they're not, accommodating themselves to the beliefs. And this becomes a major, major problem. You have, of course, the story that comes from the Vedas, where you have Purusha, and the divine, of course, sacrifice, and the various aspects of Purusha. If I can even find it here. Probably not. Okay, it's not. The various aspects, and the idea is that it says of Purusha's body, it says the mouth is connected to the Brahmin. It says that his arms are connected to the Kshatriya, the warriors. It says that his thighs are connected to the Vaishya. It says the legs are connected to the Shudras. Well, I guess that means they get the less attractive part, right? They're the ones who support, of course, guess who gets walked on, right? Mm-hmm. You know, the outcasts are, right? So you have the idea that the caste system is to be held strongly in place. So what about Indo-European gods? All right, let's see, where we go. Okay. Gods and demons. Let's talk about Indra. Indra is probably the most popular of the gods that are Aryan in the Vedas.
This is Indra's net over here that you actually set up after that.
Huh?
Over here, this picture, it's Indra's net.
Oh, there it
This
is.
done
Oh,
after
there it
that.
is. So Indra is the god of thunder, and he's the god of war, of conflict. But it's all good story. No, he's that god. And what does he do? He fights the demon by the name, who's an asura, which is a demon, by the name of Vitra. And he fights it. In some cases, it's kind of a cloud that he's fighting, you know. And Vitra, the demon, has the treasure. He's also depicted as a dragon, in some cases a serpent. So Vitra, the dragon, the demon, the serpent, literally is protecting the treasure. And Indra goes and fights the dragon. Indra, of course, wins. And what is released is the monsoon rains. The monsoon rains, light, water, and of course cows. Oh, dropping dead. Watch out, there's a cow. But this does sound familiar at all? It should. Because is not Thor also the god of thunder and war? Does he not fight the serpent of Middle Earth for the elements, the treasure? Wow, that's what a coincidence. No, because those northern groups are Indo-Europeans, just like the Aryans are down here. They have the same stories. We just change the name a little. Of course, you have another god. Just look at this over here. You have, of course, Agni, we talked about, who's the sacrificial fire. You have Soma, which, oh no. Soma is a mystery. This is the best way to put it. Soma is a mystery. He is a god, but he's also a plant that was stolen from the highest of heavens by a great eagle and brought to earth, and in rituals is often pressed into juice that is offered to the divine and priestly drinkers for both poetic insight as well as immortality. Can you imagine this drink for, why are you drinking that? A poetic insight, you know? It's like, what is Soma? Right? Well, Soma is the lord of plants, woods, streams. In fact, there's an entire book devoted to him. But does anybody know whatever happened to the Soma plant?
It's now called wine.
It's called wine, some people say. Well, I happen to have the privilege, and I won't tell who because, hello. I have a few friends who were Brahmin who told me it's a mushroom.
Oh, it's a mushroom, okay.
It's a mushroom, and unlike the authorities want you to think that it's extinct, it's still around. Thought they might find that interesting. They're not going to give away their names. So it's kind of used as a substance to give you special insight. I'm not going to go any further than that. Okay? But it is moving right along. You also have Varuna, who's a solar god. And I like Dyaus. Dyaus is fascinating. Dyaus is the father of the gods, according to the Indo-Europeans, and of course later on in Hinduism. Dyaus, his full name, as you can see on here, is Dyaus Pitra. And he, with Mata Prithvi, create the world in a sense. But what happens is Dyaus, he has a son by the name of Indra. And Indra doesn't get along with Dad very well. In fact, according to legend, according to the story, is that Daya so irritated Indra that Indra went up, reached up to heaven, grabbed Dyaus by the leg, and pulled him down and killed him. According to one story. Didn't have a great relationship. Does this remind you of anybody?
Yeah.
Let's see. And a new regime, of course, took over. Ever heard of, the Titans and the Olympians? What does Kronos do? Well, what happens to Kronos? Kronos is pulled down by who? Killed by who, I should say? Zeus. Wait a minute. Let's take a look. So the original Indo-European word for Dyaus Pitra is Dyaus Piter, which means, Dyaus means sky, Piter means father. So it's sky father or heaven father. Later on, the Indo-Europeans, when they go the other direction, it becomes Zeus Pater for the Greeks. And when they go further, you can see here, it becomes Du Piter for the Romans, hence Jupiter. See the connection? It's all the same people. There's the same group. And of course, I don't even have to go through the whole Piter, Pater, Vater, father connection, or the Mitter, Mater, Mutter, mother connection. Indo-European words, they all connect together. The basic ones. And we know that they left at a certain time because there's certain Indo-European words for wheel. So we know that they left the Caucasus Mountains around the time that they developed the wheel because they have a word in common for the wheel, but they didn't have yet spokes in the wheel because there's no common word for the spokes. So we can trace through linguistics how long they left the homeland, so to speak, and what language or what words they have in common. So they had an all-high father, sky father, already in the Caucasus Mountains before they even, or as I now say, Russia into the Caucasus Mountains. Right. Now, we're moving right along here, and look, we're actually doing really well when it comes to time. I left you with the problem, though. So what's the solution? There are various problems with Brahmanism. You see the problems? First of all, you can bribe the gods. That could be a problem. Right? You can have them do whatever you want. Right? Okay, people are disenfranchised. I mean, have people kind of stuck in the lower caste. Hey, we want to be a part of the society. We don't fit in. That's kind of a problem. And what about moral consequence? I'm not going to leave you with no answers. What about moral consequence? The work known as the Upanishads will now present the answers. They come up with this great system that starts to form. And the idea is that, well, yes, we know the universe operates automatically. That comes from the earlier belief. Automatically in the sense where you have the sacrifice that feeds the gods, and, of course, makes you strong, so you're able to do sacrifice that feeds the gods. You see, there's a cycle. It's automatic. You feed the gods, they stay strong, or you feed the universe, they stay strong, and they help you, but you have to give the material back, and so forth, and so on. It's a wheel, isn't it? This is really good. So what's going to happen is they decide, let's kind of work on the wheel idea. And they have this idea that maybe you're important as an individual. There's a group that are causing some problems between 700 to 500 BCE, and they're known as the Shramana or the Shramana movement. They are these disenfranchised priests, self-proclaimed mystics that go around the country and they cause the Brahmin headaches, saying, hey, you know what? You don't have to listen to the Brahmin priests all the time. You can do your own sacrifice. Did you know that? You can do it. You matter. You're important. But what if I want to worship my own god? Or goddess? You can do that too. I can? Yeah. These troublemakers, and they're causing a headache. And then people are starting to think. Why are they starting to think? This is the great philosophical age between 700 to 500 BCE. What's happening is people are starting to think, well, what's causing that? Well, let's go through the evidence first of all. Okay, between 700 to 500 BCE, what movements are going on? You have, of course, Hinduism is fully emerging, yes. But what's reacting also to Hinduism is Buddhism. And one of those Shramanas going around is Buddha. You didn't know that, huh? Buddha is one of those Shramanas. But also Jainism is forming at this time in reacting to. So you got three religions for the price of one. So you got Brahmanism that's being reacted to three different ways, three different interpretations of how things should be run. You got Buddhism, you got Jainism, and you got Hinduism reacting to Brahmanism, and each having a different answer to what's suffering and how to think about things. But also during the same time, Zoroastrianism is on the rise in Persia. Some people say Zoroaster is from 1300. Some people say he's from the 700s. Evidentially speaking, it's thriving during this time. You have also, at this time, Confucianism is on the rise in China. Lao Tzu, Taoism is on the rise during the same time. And then, of course, on the coast of Asia Minor, which is Turkey today, you have the pre-Socratic philosophers. Thales, Anaximander, Pythagoras, Heraclitus. People are thinking, right? People are asking the big questions. But why? Well, something's happening. It's called this. Societies are becoming more stable. And because societies are becoming more stable, and they're becoming a little bit cleaner too, they're taking more baths, you're living just a little bit longer. If you're living just a little bit longer and you're not in survival mode, you have more time to think. If you have more time to think, you have more time to question. If you have more time to question, you have more time to question authority. And why do you hold your heel, spin around and say these words? Why? And they demand answers. They want interpretation. They want to be taught. And the Brahmins are not saying anything. They're not giving enough information. So guess what? The people who are hungry for information, hungry for knowledge, what do? The Shramanas come in. And they're giving the answers. If the Brahmin won't do it, the Shramanas will. And all of a sudden, they're stirring and rumbling from below. And the indigenous people, the Munas and Dravidians, now start to assert themselves. And as they assert themselves, they will start moving up the castes too. And lo and behold, guess what happened? They're free. The Brahmins have to compromise. They have to compromise their authority, their power. They have to recognize that, okay, we have to let everybody in. No matter what. And there's evidence to tell that they start letting people in. They have to count for what they do. But there still has to be moral consequence. So the idea is that the Shramanas say, guess what? You have something here. We say a soul, they call it the Atman. Don't think Batman, it's the Atman. It's the Atman. And this matters. Your individual relationship with the gods matter. Really? Yeah. So, and there's a wheel too. Oh, we got this wheel idea. So the idea is this, is that, I'm going to be real simplistic. I know I can go into heavy theology, but we only went 15 minutes. So we'll just play with me, and I'll just go ahead and say the most simple way as possible. Think of it this way. You're born. You live your life. You get old. You die. You're reincarnated or born again. You live your life and die. It's kind of a wheel. And it's suffering. You know? You kind of want to get off this wheel. Your Atman, your soul, wants to get off this wheel. How do I get off? Well, this is where action comes about. Karma. You've heard of karma. And you have these people in the West, they go, well, I hope karma gets you. Well, and I say, well, as long as it's good karma. You mean it's good karma? Yeah. There's good karma and there's bad karma. So, action. Well, I want to get released, so how do I do this? Well, this is a simple way of explaining it, even though this is not, this helps my classes at least. The idea is that think of good karma as making you lighter, okay, and making you more spiritual, and releasing you from the material realm. So the idea is good karma, doing good actions. Next time you're reborn, up. Next time you're reborn, up. Next time you're reborn, up. And all of a sudden, you've done really good. Moksha! That's like a bubble. Boom! Explodes, and you're free. you're released from this world. Which I had a student say, like a zit? No. The idea is that you're released, you're like a bubble, in the ocean, it's freedom. Well, what if you do, and somebody asked today a question, well, what's released like? Well, it depends on what you perceive that to be. It could be a heaven-like place, according to some Hindus, a place of complete detachment, according to some other Hindus. That interpretation is up to debate because Hindus have so many opinions on this, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
The fact is, you're still off from suffering through good action. What if you do bad stuff? Same idea. Bad stuff. No. Oh. Think of the bad stuff, bad karma, as like incrustations of filth that builds up on your body and makes you heavier, more material. I always like the images that are Hare Krishna books because it makes people who are going that way to make almost like gorillas and eating like meat. They're all brutish, It's like, wow. And in some cases, you move down to insect level. In some cases, you move down to demon level. In some cases, you move down to oblivion. Just don't do it, right? Don't just say no to bad karma. And that's the thought, right? So you move further and further down. And that's the answer. Now, some people ask me, well, what's that like? How do you compare that to Abrahamic religions? Think of it this way. In Abrahamic religions, like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, it's the idea of you give God the driver's seat. He's driving the car. You're the passenger. And you have to depend on His wisdom of where you're going. You're dependent upon Him. You got it? You let go of that control and you let God do the driving. But you're in the passenger seat. You're there. In Hinduism, you're in the driver's seat and the gods are the passenger, giving you advice as you try to drive. No, don't go off, move! Crash. Because you're the one in control. The gods are leading you through signs of how to get out. Please, they're the ones going, no, don't do this. You want to do that. But you're the one who controls, through karma, your actions of whether you go off the road or go onto the road. Of course, there's variants of those perspectives. But that's kind of in the general sense. What's going to happen to the caste system, though? I mean, should we get rid of the caste system, But see, the Hindus have a different answer. Now, Buddhists, the Buddhism is reacting to Brahmanism at this time. And the answer for them is that, we get rid of castes. It's compassion. It's love. It's let anybody in. Men, women, upper caste, lower caste, it doesn't matter. Stranger. Generosity for all, at least idealistically speaking. There's variants that, it's not like that. What's the idealistic idea? So it's almost like a, national coverage, So everybody's involved. Hinduism decides to react differently. As opposed to saying, hey, let's be open to all, what we're going to do is take the caste system and form subcastes called jati. And the idea is that we don't expand like this. We're going to micromanage into smaller groups because only smaller groups understand everybody's personal needs. See the difference? I know you're going, oh, but no. You got to think now. Remember, this is ancient times. Life was pretty tough. And they broke down the jatis according to occupation. So if you are a wool merchant, you get to be part of the wool merchant jati, which is great, because you live in your own little section of town. Your daughter gets to marry a wool merchant's son and vice versa, which is nice. You eat together. You spend time together. You play together. You pray together. It's like a little small help group. If your house burns down, theoretically, although this doesn't happen too much in India today, theoretically is that they're supposed to help rebuild that house. If something happens to you, your parents and your orphans, theoretically, your jati will now take you in and take care of you that way. So it's a small group that helps people. And this was the ideal concept. I know it's not like that today, but I'm saying this was the ideal behind it, is that how you take care of people is individual care. So you have to form smaller units, smaller groups to help other people. Does that make sense? You know, I'm not saying I agree or disagree. I just want you to understand the mentality behind it. So Buddhism says everybody, but sometimes that gets overwhelming. Hinduism says let's break it up and focus on different groups, and maybe we can help out that way. So it's a different perspective. It's a different idea, right? And then, of course, along with the changeover, this transformation, you now have the rise of new gods and goddesses. But you've got goddesses. Goddesses that have power. Of course, now you have, who's rising to the top, you have Brahma. Brahma is known as the creator. He creates. That's it. Yeah, he creates. He's kind of like Zeus in the sense where he creates, and that's about it. There's as many temples dedicated to him as there was to Zeus. You know, Zeus had Dodona, Olympus, kind of the same idea. Because Brahman has an Olympian distance. Now he's part of the Trimurti, or the Trinity, from our perspective, which is Brahma, which is the creator, Vishnu, who is the preserver, and Shiva, who is the destroyer. Keeps the universe in balance, right? But you know, they all have consorts. They got ladies now, because we're now at the time of Hinduism. So you got a little more of equality going on. So Brahma has a girlfriend, has a wife. Her name is Sarasvati. And Sarasvati is a goddess of wisdom. She's a goddess of music, inspiration. Scholars love her. What I like about Sarasvati, she got her name from what's called the Sarasvati River. Nobody knows where that was. But they know that there was intellectual centers all around the Sarasvati River. And so that gave her that, the idea that she's connected with learning. But Sarasvati has another name. Her other name is Vash. V-A-C with a little swirl underneath it, which stands for the word, or that which is spoken. According now to Hindus, Brahma, he thought, mentas, he thought. And out of Brahma's mind comes wisdom. Comes out of his mind. Wisdom. And this wisdom now goes over the surface and divides the water and the land, according to some Hindu versions, and organizes the universe. Wisdom. Also known as Vash, who is the word that comes from the mind of God. Does this sound familiar, or is it just me? It's just me. It's just me, right? So you have Semitic stories that connect to this. You have Heraclitus of Ephesus in the 400s that came up with this idea. You know, Zeus speaks, the Logos, the Word, which later on goes into the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. Right? You have the idea also, from the mind of Zeus comes wisdom, which is Athena. Indo-Europeans, everyone. Right? So you have Brahma and Sarasvati, and then you have Vishnu, who is the preserver. I like Vishnu because he's the guy that fixes things. You know, he's the one where things go wrong, he intervenes. In some cases, he has to go in personally. So he's like he becomes an avatar. He makes himself into an animal or a human, and he goes in there and he fixes things. And in the 7th incarnation, according to the 10 list as opposed to the 22 list, in the 7th incarnation, he is Rama. And then he becomes Krishna in the 8th. And he goes in there and he shows people the way. He shows people that there's a better way of life, a better way of living. But the idea of a god, Vishnu, becoming incarnate as a human is very interesting. And then you got Shiva. Oh, sorry, before we go there. You have the girlfriend, Lakshmi. Lakshmi is the goddess of luck, of fortune, of wealth, of bounty. So he's paired up with her. Now you have Shiva, and Shiva is just like, ugh. Shiva's the destroyer. But he also creates as he destroys. And you're going, how does he do that? I'm going to give you an imagery and you'll understand it all. During this time that came up in agriculture, the idea of burning your fields. Have you heard about this before? What happens when you burn your field?
Fertilizer.
You fertilize the nutrients. So it's destroyed, but guess what? It creates new life. So it's not a contradiction. New life comes about. So Shiva destroys, but he also creates. And then who is he with? He's with everybody. He's with Parvati, Kali. He's with Durga. He has Shakti power, female energy within himself that becomes personified in different ways. He has the lay of the land. You know, he's a walking contradiction. But he's part of the indigenous aspect. To conclude, even though there's many other gods, the Trimurti, they're a perfect compromise between the old system, Brahmanism, and the new system. Think about it. Here you have, right, Brahma. He is Indo-European. Sarasvati is indigenous. Vishnu and Lakshmi are actually Indo-European. Shiva and everybody else are indigenous. You got a balance between the old traditional Brahmanism and the new, and also gods and goddesses. But you now also have a moral code that keeps everything together. To follow the old cycle, you have a new moral code that what you do can either save you or destroy you, just like the Trimurti. Done. Thank you.